What's going on, everybody? Gar Hoover here, and today we're going to be going through my track Chocolate on the PO-33. Now, Chocolate is a dubstep track. It uses a lot of samples from SpongeBob. That's where the title of the track comes from. It's not that dubstep is related to chocolate in any way. All that to say, if you've never heard the track, check it out right here. If you have, let's just jump right in. The samples are below for drums and all of the sounds I made in Massive and FM8. So be sure to download those and put those on your pocket operator if you're looking for something a little heavier. Now that being said, let's get started with this track. Let's begin by looking at the samples for this track. So we've got a standard wub, we've got some lead lines, we've got plenty of more wubs I've made. As I mentioned, they're all available in the description below, free download, so enjoy that. Got another weird one. And then we got our sub bass, which is always necessary for some good EDM. We've got our SpongeBob samples. And then we got the drum kit with the layered hi-hats, as I always do. Weird sound I didn't use at all. An additional drum kit, copy-pasted it into the other bank from the same drum kit. High-pitch wub I put in the drum kit, you'll see why later on. An additional one, it's got two different sounds in it. There they are. We've got this chord progression that I chopped up. So we'll hear how that plays out later on as well in the drop. And then we've got the guitar samples, which are actually fake. I made them in Massive, but they sound pretty good. Alright, so now let's talk about the intro and verse of the song. Let me punch it in. It's just the top row. So you can hear that the guitar plucks are happening on the 2 and the 4 of the beat. And pretty much you just can put it in on that middle third row, or the 3, 7, 11, and 15 to get that sound. But you can also hear that guitar, I put some reverb on it, and it has a long reverb tail. But I don't want that tail of reverb to cut in to the next pattern. As we can hear here, that first step has already 4 components, and I don't want them to overlap, because when 4 things overlap, the drums get cut. So what I did to prevent the reverb tail is add this little portion of the reverb. You hear that weird little click sound? That's enough to stop the reverb. There it is. You can hear it right there. And so you can immediately cut the sound of the reverb, and that keeps it from bleeding. So now let's take a look at the drums for this section. Dubstep drums are pretty simple. It just goes, as you all know, kick, snare, which isn't too crazy. But then if we look at the hi-hats, they start to fill it in and add that energy, right? So I took that space where there's that crash that's on the 2 and the 4 of the beat with the guitar that we had at the intro and now in the verse. But now with the hi-hats in there, they cut the sound. So now let's check out the bass for this section. So the bass, once again, pretty simple. It's following the kick, and that's not me being lazy necessarily. It just provides additional weight to it all, having the kick and the bass together. It helps make it feel tight. So if you listen here at the end of the section, so you hear that little like island drum going on right there. That can't be coming from that drum kit, because that's a highlighted hi-hat sound clearly. So it has to be from my copied drum track. And you can see here, I've got 2 of those islandy drum sounds going in steps 15 and 16. But you can hear it triggering 4 times. That's because if you hold down a step and press BPM, you can have it re-trigger. And I have it re-triggering twice for both of those steps, making it 4 hits. And so it just helps give it energy to either come back around and loop again or go into the next section. So now let's talk about the build, because this is a pretty energetic section.
Could we interest you in some chocolate?
Chocolate? Did you say chocolate? Yes, sir. With or without a chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
So you can hear there's a lot of energy that builds up in this section. Let's start by looking at the first section. So you can clearly hear those claps that provide a little bit of energy going on that first row down and the third row down. And then also we can see here that I've got some retriggering again happening on the second pattern.
Did you say chocolate?
And these claps here at the very end just kind of let our ear know that something big's about to happen as we get into that final section. And we also have that conversation between SpongeBob and the chocolate guy going on
We
here
interest
too.
you in some chocolate.
Chocolate?
You can see there I already had to chop it up because I didn't want to have the conversation going how it was in the show because it didn't keep on beat. So
Chocolate.
Chocolate? Did
I have
you
each
say
of these in the drum
chocolate?
section in its own trigger so that it stays on beat a lot easier. So it keeps that conversation rhythmic and still feels a little offbeat, but at least it keeps it going. So try that with your vocal chops on the
Did you say
PO-33.
chocolate? Yes, sir. With or without nuts? Did you?
And so with or without nuts, this phrase was a little bit too long before I got to the chocolate screen. So I just put nuts. And it ended up sounding pretty good, so I'm happy with it. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the drum and the hi-hat and the additional drum track in the first pattern. And that makes 4 tracks going at the start of that first pattern.
Could we interest you
So
in some chocolate?
you can hear that kind of gets you ready for that drop as well.
Did you
And so let's
say
hear it all
chocolate?
together.
Yes, sir. With or without nuts? Chocolate? Chocolate!
So now let's take a look at the 2 final patterns of the build because they've got a lot that's going on with them, a lot of automation and energy to them just to make it ready so that when we go into that dubstep drop it's ready. You can hear each one of those wubs is going up in pitch by 1. It's not attached to a scale, and how you do that is you just go in and you tap it, hit right, punch it in, go back out of edit mode, go into performance, put it up 1, go back into edit mode, punch in the next one. It's a very tedious process, but you can hear right there because sometimes the knobs can get finicky and whatnot, but it still is a very effective way to make it build really strong. You can also see that this sound is going on the first vertical row and the third vertical row, alternating. But then once we get to the second pattern, it goes into each one and fills it all the way in and gets a lot more panicky feeling. And you can also hear that that third and final row is hitting its max in pitch. It can't go any higher. So with the knob, as you can see, you can only go so high, and that's a full octave. So I'm hitting my max point with adjusting the pitch. But that doesn't mean I can't add more dramaticness to it. So you can hear that there's something else going on as well. And so what I'm doing is adjusting the filter. I'm holding down right and twisting the knob at the same time as it's playing. So you can hear me adjusting this in real time. So holding down right, you can automate it all and make it sound a lot more lively and have adjustments going on. So let's do it correctly this time. So hold down the right and you just twist it up. You can hear it's fading out, it's building up so that it adds that additional energy. So now let's take a look at what the snare is doing in this section because it is also lending to a lot of the energy that's taking place. You can see in here it's hitting every 16 steps, and on the final one it's re-triggering several times, right? It's on that 2 triggers as it always is. So it does that double 2 trigger thing at the same time. And then the final row it's triggering 4 times so that it adds even more tension. Oh. That was my bad. I did it to the wrong section. Whatever, it's still going to work out. Let's just go to the final one as I was talking about. You can hear it there for sure. You can see it's triggering twice for that top row, and then for that final one, it's triggering 4 times in that third row before the kick snare combo. And the snare's doing the same thing as the bass, where I'm holding down right and adjusting the pitch manually and punching it in. Kind of tedious, but it really does help with the build. So now let's check out that kick snare combo right before. A pretty standard dubstep-y drum fill, and you can see it's being re-triggered in there. Oop, that was the wrong one. Here we go. This one's being re-triggered twice. So you can hear it go. That double din din din, that double hit there at the end lets us know we're about to go into the drop pretty much. Alright, so probably the most technical section is the drop itself. You can see I had to punch in that strange pattern, but you'll hear why in a second. You know what? Actually, let's just look at this first pattern first. Okay, so you can see I've got those two wub sounds going on, and those were the ones I showed off at the beginning in the samples section. And you can see the first wub is going down the first vertical row 3 different spots. They're both skipping the second row. But you get that alternating rhythm type feel, and you can hear that second sound. It's just that one little sound by itself right there. But when you re-trigger it like crazy, it sounds really wild. And you can see, yep, it's being re-triggered 2 times. And as we know, 2 times 4 is 8. So we've got 8 of those fast-paced sounds right there. So now that we've covered the dubstep sounds, let's just talk about that bass that's going on in the background. We still have the sub bass hiding back there, and once again, it's going with the kicks, but it's also getting cut out with the snare. So how you get it to stop is actually, if it's a melodic bank, you can adjust the right knob while holding down a specific note and adjust the length of it. So now it's only going 4 steps of the sequence, and then it's cutting off right at the snare hits, which means it's a good time to talk about the drum kit itself. You can hear that I've got that crash sound not only on the kick, but I have it on the snare as well. It's layered, so I only need 1 drum section for it. Let me show you what I mean. Let me find them real quick. Aha. So you can make a beat that sounds pretty legit pretty quickly if you just layer your sounds, and then you only have to use 1 bank. And so the big thing when it comes to making a song is making sure that you don't have anything that overlaps. So a big thing is to just hold down your sound button, and you can see the different sounds light up as they're triggered. And you can see there I'm keeping it at 4, which is good. That's the goal, because none of my sounds are getting cut out. So now let's check out the other sounds we got. That simple distorted FM8 yoi sound, which I see here. It's getting triggered 4 times, very simple. And that's all. It's nothing too crazy going on there. But in the second half of this pattern, we have that chord progression. And you can see it's being triggered on the 9, 11, 13, and 15. And I just chopped up the chord progression itself to make sure that it worked. But what I really did when I recorded it was just record it all together in 1 clump and then just threw it in a drum bank so that it could get chopped up. And that saves space and time, which is very valuable on the PO-33. And that kind of leads me to another random thought. If you think this is cheating by just putting in my own chords, you're crazy, because most people use the PO-33 for chopping up songs they don't own. So at least I'm using my own stuff for it, and I'm just trying to save space and try and make quality music. Alright, so the rant's over now. Let's get back to looking at the samples here. Let's go back to the drums, because here at the end of it, I actually have an additional little hit going on. That little doo-doo is a pitched version of the snare that I'm triggering 2 times. So all you have to do is twist the pitch knob in performance mode and then put it in edit mode, and it'll sound great. So now let's look at the final pattern for that section. So this is the same pattern as the other one, but it's got the chocolate guy screaming. And you can see we only have 3 sounds going there, but we can have 4, so we're still good to go. So let's chain those 3 different patterns together to make 4 patterns. So we have the first pattern, which we've gone through, and then we have it going into the second pattern without the chocolate screen. And now we're back into the third one, which is the first pattern, and now to the fourth one with the chocolate screen. So it really is just 2 patterns, but then there's the alternate one that is the final one. Now let's hear the second section of dubstep. Alright, so let's break down this first pattern. So we got those 2 distinct sounds. We got this weird like little wub type of thing, and then we've got this click sound right here that is pretty interesting as well. But actually those are both part of the alternating wub from the first section, but the PO-33, when I loaded them, chopped them into 2 different sounds. So I said, hey, let's use it, let's see what happens. And I think it actually sounds pretty awesome. And we have it re-triggering 2 times at the start, those little clicks, and then for the second section, we just punch them in just normal without any re-triggering. Alright, so let me try and find that other sound. Oh, there it is. That was my bad. So let's hear what this sound sounds like. Great, really wild sounding. We see it's on the 7th step, but we do not want this sound to overlap or else we'll lose one of our drums because we'll be over 4. So what we have to do is adjust the length of the sample to 2. That provides that space that we need to keep all 4 tracks running nice and smooth. Now let's check out the bass. It's following the kick, nothing too crazy. So that's not anything too wild. But let's check out the drums. So we had the same samples as the drop in the other section, but we filled it in with hi-hats. So it's that crashing sound, but we filled it in with hi-hats and they're getting cut off, making that open hi-hat sound instead of that crash sound that we had in the first section of the drop. And we also have those 2 other wubs going on, and that's just going down a half step. So now let's look at the second section, which we hear that other sound that's going on. Which is pretty similar. It just is a different iteration of those notes, just with a different dubstep sound, which is creating that alternate sound. You can also hear in the second version of the second pattern that we've got Patrick saying yes sir, which is kind of simple, but it helps transition into this next section, which you'll hear right here, which is kind of like the outro of the drop. So let's take a look actually at that outro. So the lead line rhythmically is going 1, 4, 9, 12 the first time, and then the second time through it's going to the 15. So it loops around and it's a 2-pattern melody. You can also hear that I put a lot of reverb on that sound, and when it's pitched down you can really hear how long that tail is. It adds just additional space to the sound. So now let's take a look at these little wubs that we've got in this section alongside the sub bass, because I think these two kind of pair well together and are going at the same time. So the sub bass is following alongside the kick as it's always been doing, but also we see that the pattern is very similar rhythmically to the lead line, that it's following that 1, 4, 9, 12, just as we see here with the lead line, and that keeps it all meshed together and keeps it really tight sounding. Something else you could do is adjust the length of the bass. See how it cut out with the snare there? It makes it just sound a lot more glued together, keeps it really tight sounding. So if you're looking to make a song sound really tight, always have the bass cut out with the snare, especially for EDM. We also see we got those hi-hats filling in once again, nothing new there. Pretty casual sound and groove to it. And the reverb tail from those lead lines sounds great leading into the intro of the song. It helps that transition along so much better. So when you have that smooth transition, it kind of makes it so it feels almost like it's just a continuous experience between the beginning and the end without it being jarring. So that's the end of the tutorial. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. Subscribe right here to my channel. It's pretty easy to do. Or you can check out some of these other tutorials I've made and enjoy those. And don't forget, the samples to this video are in the description, so be sure to check that out. If you have any questions about this video or have any ideas for any upcoming videos I should make, please leave them in the comments below.